Your pain is not a corporate liability, Sarah. The words from Julian Vance fell like a blade. Sarah Jones froze, her hand gripping the crystal glass, the dark pink scar burning under the lights on her brown skin. She inhaled, pressed down. Every reaction, then nodded. Yes, sir. Her voice was hoarse, like stone sinking in water. Julian didn't stop. He adjusted his tie, glanced at her as if inspecting merchandise. Remember this? Here we sell image, not pity. Then he turned away, leaving Sarah with her throbbing hand. The Ledger dining room glittered. Piano notes drifting, guests laughing in harmony. But in the kitchen, where Sarah slipped back, was another world. Suffocating heat, the stench of burnt grease. The espresso machine hissed in the corner, each burst of steam a cruel reminder it had scorched her hand 3 weeks ago. 3 times she filed repair requests, 3 times Julian dismissed them, pending. One word, cold and detached, leaving scars carved into her flesh. Sarah hid the bandaged hand beneath thin gloves. She swallowed a dry painkiller, face tightening. From her apron pocket, her phone lit up. The lock screen showed her 6-year-old son with big black eyes, clutching an asthma inhaler like it was life itself. She brushed her finger softly over. The photo then put it away quickly. There was no room for weakness. She had to stand firm, had to earn enough for his medicine. Out in the dining hall, a couple left behind a nearly untouched fillet. We're carb light, they laughed. Sarah cleared the plate, the weight of the meat heavy as stone on her tray. The burn on her hand flared again. She forced a smile one rehearsed thousands of times and walked steadily, every step a tightrope. One slip, everything would collapse. Slow down, don't tilt the tray. Julian's voice cut again behind her, cold as a box cutter. Table 4 wants to swap the Pinot. Guests want something with heavier oak. Understood?
Understood.
Sarah replied, swallowing both shame and pain. A few blocks away, Ethan Sterling sat in his penthouse office, city lights spilling through glass walls. On his laptop screen, the numbers gleamed. Revenue plus 18% YoY, figure that should have filled him with pride. Instead, Ethan saw it as a discordant note. Papers cluttered the desk. Miami expansion contracts, VIP lounge designs, supplier reports. The wide leather chair still bore the imprint of his late father, who had collapsed from a stroke. Leaving behind the keys to the ledger and his final words, "Don't let this place lose its soul," Ethan had promised, then handed daily operations to Julian so he could chase growth. Now, every night, those words gnawed at him like termites in wood. On the wall hung a black and white photo, his grandfather standing among the first staff in 1968, faces of every color, shoulders touching, smiles radiant. Beneath it, a brass plaque read, "The soul of this place is served on every plate." Ethan stared at the words, feeling their weight like a sentence passed down. His phone chimed with a new email, feedback@sterlinghospitality.com. Subject: The Sterling Ledger's new secret ingredient. He opened it. A single photo, hand wrapped in thick, yellowing bandages, clearing a plate of wasted food. Cold steak, streaks of congealed sauce, the edge of a spotless white uniform. Stark against dark skin, the deep pink scar, ugly detail, painfully real. Beneath the photo, just one word: suffering. Ethan froze. Outside, the city blazed with light. But inside, something cracked in his gaze. He looked back at his grandfather's photo, then to the screen again. That scar was the first fracture. In the glass he had thought unbreakable. He knew then the gilded shell was crumbling, and he, a Sterling, no longer had the right to look away. Ethan Sterling could not sleep. The photo seared into his eyes, a hand wrapped in bandages, the word suffering pounding in his head like a hammer. Every excuse he had once clung to for staying on the sidelines now dissolved into smoke. All to see it with his own eyes, called Ava Chen, the family attorney. "I'm going in," he said curtly. "Going in how?" Ava asked. "Like a ghost," Ethan replied, his voice rough. "No one can know who I am." The plan formed quickly. He would become a new employee under the name Leo Rossia File Ava, fabricated in a matter of hours. Forgettable name, ordinary one. That drew no attention. The next morning, Ethan met Samuel Sam Washington in a small cafe on Manhattan's East Side. Sam had worked at the Ledger for over 30 years, since Ethan's grandfather's time. His hair was white now, his hand shook faintly. But his eyes carried the same steadiness of a man who had witnessed too much change. "Your grandfather built a home," Sam said, his voice low and deliberate. "Julian turned it into a plantation." Ethan stayed silent. The words pierced his chest, leaving an emptiness impossible to fill. Sam explained. Julian called his system brand alignment. He kept a secret ledger, categorizing staff with coded symbols. White employees were always given priority at high tipping tables. Employees of color were pushed to the margins, noisy corners, cramped sections, stingy guests. A climate of fear kept everyone in line. Those who resisted vanished. Those who stayed silent survived. On Sarah's accident, Sam was certain it wasn't a chance. Julian knew the machine was broken, but fixing it cost money.
So he
let it be, and the price was her hand. Ethan sat frozen, his fists tight. He thought of the family legacy of the 1968 photograph, of his father's promise, his grandfather's warning, and he saw how he had let it all slip away. That afternoon, Ethan stood before a mirror. He stripped off his Armani suit, removed the tie, cropped his hair, and put on cheap-rimmed glasses. A plain white shirt, black slacks, worn-out shoes. Strangers stared back at him. No CEO, just Leo Rossi, an anonymous worker. He inhaled deeply, as if pulling his soul out of its gilded shell and pouring it into another body. In that moment, he realized only by becoming invisible could he truly see. The first day at the Ledger. Ethan entered through the back door into a storm of grease and shouting. No gleaming office, no figures on a spreadsheet. This was the reality. Scorching heat, printers spitting out orders, hands moving frantically, faces drained with fatigue. The manager paired him as a trainee with Sarah Jones. Ethan accepted a tray from her. The bandaged hand trembled slightly, yet her gaze held firm. He began to watch. Sarah moved swiftly, every gesture practiced, forcing pain into silence, as if it never existed. Only when she turned away did he catch the brief wince, the breath sucked in through clenched teeth. Julian strode by, eyes grazing Sarah. He didn't need to speak, his look alone froze her in place. Then he turned to a white employee. "You've got the sterling look. Keep it up." A simple compliment, yet it carved a line in stone. Ethan's blood boiled. He looked around. Tables near the windows, prime spots, fat tips manned entirely by white staff. Tables by the kitchen, or beside the restrooms, mostly staffed by people of color. A machine of injustice humming smoothly under the veneer of efficiency. When the shift ended, Sarah hurried to change, clutching a tattered bag, rushing toward the bus stop. Ethan followed from a distance. She kept checking her watch, her face marked with urgency. In her eyes, he saw not just exhaustion, but the crushing weight of survival. A woman fighting to hold her son back from death's scythe, while smiling. For those who dismissed her existence, Ethan stood in the shadows, his chest burning. The first spark quiet, but unquenchable. That night, in a small rented apartment under the name Leo Rossi, Ethan opened the suffering email again. The photo of the bandaged hand haunted every thought. He knew he couldn't simply fire Julian. He had to dismantle the machine Julian had built. He opened a notebook and began to write. Day 1. Everything he had seen with his own eyes. He knew the road ahead would be long and dangerous. But one truth was already clear. The ghost in the machine had awakened. A tiny recorder hidden in his shirt pocket blinked a faint green light. He sat in the corner of the break room pretending to check his phone, while outside, Julian had just finished a private talk with 2 white employees. "Guests want a seamless experience," Julian said, voice low, but sharpened at the edges. "That means the face serving them must match the wallet they carry. You understand?" Awkward laughter followed, then the scrape of chairs. Ethan sat. A Mexican cook told him bitterly, "I've worked here 10 years. Julian promised me a promotion 3 times. Always found an excuse to deny it. A Haitian cleaner added with a weary laugh. I got fined hard for missing 1 glass. A white coworker forgot an entire tray. Julian called it a minor slip. You think that's fair? Ethan nodded, but inside each story cut like a blade. He was no longer the outsider reading reports. A teacher's voice crackled through the line. Your son's having an asthma attack. He needs the hospital immediately. Sarah's face drained. She ran to Julian. Please, I need to switch shifts. I have to. Julian glanced up from his leather-bound notebook, his expression flat. We're short-staffed. Personal problems aren't company problems. Sarah bit her lip hard. Just 10 minutes later, a white waitress came up, giggling. Julian, I've got concert tickets tonight. Can I, of course? Have fun, Katie. You deserve it, Julian interrupted, his tone suddenly honeyed. Sarah froze in place. She whispered into her phone, begging a neighbor to pick up her son. When she hung up, her eyes were red, but she went back to serving tables. Ethan watched, his chest tightening. The glass had spilled over. That night, Ethan met Sam at the same old cafe. The notebook, Ethan said. I need to see it. Sam nodded slowly. It's in Julian's office. Desk drawer always locked. But there's a way. A plan was formed. The moment. Tomorrow's lunch rush. Sam would cause a small accident in the kitchen to pull Julian away. Ethan would have less than 2 minutes. The next day, with the dining room packed, Sam deliberately spilled a pan of oil. Flames leaped up, alarms blared, chaos erupted. Julian charged into the kitchen, barking orders. This was the chance. Ethan slipped into the office. The room was tidy to the point of soullessness, smelling of polished wood and new paper. He went straight to the desk, knelt at the drawer. The lock was small, but he was ready. A bent paperclip, his hand trembling slightly. But steady enough. Clicked the dry sound of a trigger snapping. He opened the drawer. Inside, a thick black leather notebook, silver-threaded edges. Ethan opened it, heart racing. Pages filled with names, highlighted in colors. Beside them, handwritten codes, a cue, aggressive questioning. Low CA, low customer affinity. HR risk. Sarah's name sat in the middle, marked in red. The note scrawled low CA. HR risk. Ethan snapped photos of every page. Each shutter click was a blade slicing through the ledger's glittering mask. This was no longer a suspicion. This was proof. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Julian was returning. Ethan slammed the notebook shut, slid it back, and locked the drawer, his pulse hammering in his chest. He slipped out just as the door opened, and Julian walked in. Ethan kept his head down, pretending to carry a tray of dishes. Sweat trickled down his neck. Only when he made it back to the kitchen did his heart begin to slow, but the photos burned bright in his mind. This was not a management tool. It was a map of hate disguised as business. That night, Ethan sat in his small apartment, scrolling. Through the photos, Sarah's face appeared in his thoughts, her eyes red as she begged to go to her son. Next to it, the cold label, HR risk. His body shook, not with fear, but with fury. That notebook was the beating heart of the monster Julian had built, and now Ethan had touched it. He knew the day of reckoning was drawing near. That morning, the New York sky hung heavy, gray clouds draped like a curtain waiting to rise on. A play of fate. Inside the Ledger dining hall, staff gathered for the pre-shift meeting. Julian stood at the center, suit pressed, smile cold, eyes sharp as razors slicing across every face. Last night's revenue was the highest of the week. It's thanks to our system, thanks to discipline. Those who keep to discipline will be rewarded, those who don't. He paused, lips curling faintly. The door is always open. Yes. Restaurant doors swung wide. A man entered, not through the back entrance of the staff, but through the front. Black tailored suit, silk tie, neatly cut hair. All eyes turned. Sarah froze. That was no Leo Rossi. That was a Sterling. Ethan, she whispered, almost unbelieving. Julian faltered for a breath, then forced a polite smile. Mr. Sterling?" What a surprise. Ethan didn't answer. His voice rang out, steel hard. "Assemble every employee. Kitchen, servers, dishwashers. Everyone. Right now." In the main dining hall, Julian hesitated. "Are you sure? The lunch rush is now," Ethan cut in, his eyes leaving no room for debate. Within minutes, the room was packed. Faces weary, hands bandaged, palms hardened by labor. Sarah stood among them, heart racing. Ethan stepped forward, looking at them not as a CEO, but as a son and grandson, burdened by the weight of 3 generations. "This past week I was here with you, not in this suit but in a cheap shirt, under the name Leo Rossi. I listened, I saw, I understood." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some employees gaped. Sarah clutched the napkin in her pocket. Stunned, Ethan nodded slightly, continuing, "I trusted the wrong man. I gave the ledger to Julian Vance, thinking he would protect my family's legacy. But what he built is not a restaurant. It's a machine that grinds people down." He gestured. Chen, the family lawyer, wheeled forward a small case, opened. Her laptop, and connected to the big screen above the bar. Images appeared, pages from the playbook, employees' names, coded labels, AQ, low CA, HR risk. Silence smothered the room. Only the sound of heavy breathing remained. Employees of color exchanged tearful glances. White staff bowed their heads in shame. Sarah covered her mouth when she saw her own name in red, annotated low CA, HR risk. Her heart clenched as, if crushed, yet within the pain was release. The truth was finally unveiled. Ethan turned to Julian. "My grandfather built the ledger on the belief that the soul of this place was served on every plate. He saw value in every person. You reduced them to risk categories in your notebook." Julian stepped forward, face pale, but his words still cold. "This is a misunderstanding. It's a management tool. Every big business has one. These codes are just profit optimization. You want higher wages? Bigger tips? I made that happen for you." His gaze swept the room, trying to reignite old fear. "Do you want to go back to loose discipline? Customers leaving? Doors closing? Do you think Sterling will pay for the disorder?" "I did this so we survive." For a moment, silence. Julian smiled, believing fear would win again. Then Katie, the young white waitress, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "He's lying, I know. I got the best tables. I saw Sarah being treated unfairly. I stayed silent because I benefited. But I can't pretend anymore." She turned to Sarah, tears streaming. "I'm sorry. I stayed quiet too long." A buzz broke out. A Mexican cook stepped forward. 10 years I've worked here, never promoted. New guys walk in and take the higher seats. It's all in that notebook." A Haitian cleaner added, "I was fined for missing 1 glass. A white coworker forgot a whole tray. Julian called it a minor slip. That's the truth." Voices rose, firm and unyielding. The wall of silence cracked, then collapsed. Julian shouted, voice cracking, fury unhinged. "You don't understand? Without me, you're nothing. You only exist because of this system. You owe me everything." Ethan stood tall, eyes cold. "No, Julian, you owe them. You stole their dignity, their opportunities, their conscience. You didn't build the ledger. You poisoned it. And today I'm taking it back." Turn to security. "Remove him. Julian Vance is never to set foot in the ledger again." 2 guards seized Julian, his struggles echoing with shouts of revenue, profit, betrayal. But his words sank into the silence of the crowd. The door slammed behind him. A stillness settled. Then Sarah wept not from fear, but because for the first time she saw light cut through the dark. Tears of release streamed down her cheeks, turning the scar on her hand into something radiant, a living testament. Ethan looked around, saw trembling faces, tears, fists clenched with resolve. He knew this was not the end, but it was the beginning. His voice cracked but held steady. "I was wrong to be absent. I let a man like him hold your futures. Today I stand here to say, no more. The ledger will change. Not with slogans, with action. But I need you. I need truth. I need courage. Together, we will rebuild from the ground up. At first scattered, then swelling, until it roared like rain washing filth away. Sarah wiped her tears and raised her head. In her eyes, Ethan was no longer a distant CEO. He was a sterling yes but, also a man who had stepped down to stand with them, to share their burden. In that moment, the sterling ledger was no longer a gilded cage. It became a battlefield, and the birthplace of hope. Ethan knew the road ahead stretched long, but he also knew the most vital thing had happened. The wall of silence had fallen. The truth had been heard. The ledger dining hall still trembled, with echoes after the door slammed shut, dragging Julian Vance and all his darkness away. No one spoke. They stood there, looking at each other, as if waking from a nightmare that had stretched too long. Ethan Sterling drew in a deep breath. His chest was still heavy, but this time it was the weight of truth. He looked around the room, red eyes, trembling face. Sin finally spoke. "This failure isn't his alone," he said, voice rough, but steady. "It is mine too. I was absent. I looked at spreadsheets, but not at people. I abandoned the legacy of my father and grandfather and let someone like him destroy it, and for that, I am truly sorry." The confession rippled through the room. People weren't used to hearing a boss bow his head. That was exactly what shifted the air. Anger began to melt into listening. Ethan didn't make vague promises. He made decisions right there. The ledger will close for 3 days. Every employee will be paid in full. We must heal before we can serve again. Sam Washington will act as interim manager. An independent audit will begin immediately to compensate everyone cheated of tips or promotions. And most importantly, he paused, eyes locking on Sarah. A council of dignity will be formed. You will decide how we work. No more divisions of skin color, no more fear. All decision shifts, table assignments, discipline will pass through that council. The room went still, then gradually. Those stunned gazes shifted into glimmers of hope. Ethan stepped closer, breaking the last distance. "Sarah Jones." His voice softened. "I can't erase the pain you've endured, but I want to ask, will you stand up and lead this council? Help us rebuild the ledger into what it should have been." Sarah stood frozen. She looked around, though. Co-workers of color pushed aside for too long. The silent ones, and even the white staff bowed their heads in regret. For the first time, she saw genuine expectation in their eyes. She inhaled, then nodded. No hesitation. A firm nod that cut off years of bitterness. The room erupted with applause. Sarah bowed her head, tears rolling, but a smile broke through the smile of someone. A stack of crystal. Glasses waited to be polished. He picked up a clean cloth and began to wipe them in slow, careful circles. Sam Washington joined him, cloth in hand. "It's been a long time since I've seen this," he said, voice thick with emotion. Then others followed, line formed, side by side, polishing. Clearing, boss and staff no longer divided. The air was quiet but no longer fearful. It was the quiet of a wound beginning to close. The next day, headlines exploded. Sterling ledger under fire. CEO Ethan Sterling exposes racist system. Photos of the playbook splashed across papers, shaking the city. But instead of hiding, Ethan faced it head-on. At a press conference, he stood beside Sarah and Sam. "The ledger was once a symbol," he said, "but under the wrong hands, it became a stain. I'm not here to excuse it. I'm here to repair it." Sarah was invited to speak. Her voice trembled, but rang clear. "We're not asking for pity. We're asking for fairness. And today we begin to reclaim it." The simple words shook the room. People no longer saw her as just a waitress with a scar. She was the face of thousands who had been pushed to the margins. 3 days later, the ledger reopened. At the entrance, the brass plaque gleamed anew. The words, "The soul of this place is served on every plate," shining bright. Sarah walked in, head high. The scar on her hand still marked her skin, but it was no longer a wound of shame. It was a badge. Ethan stood at the bar, not in an expensive suit, but in a neat shirt, sleeves rolled, setting tables alongside staff. He wasn't running it from above, he was in its heartbeat. Ethan smiled softly. not me. All of us. The camera in the mind's eye pulled back. The Ledger dining room, no more artificial light, no more forced smiles. Only real people, starting again together. The Ledger was no paradise. Work remained, wounds remained. But the most important had been achieved. Truth revealed, fear broken, trust rekindled. In Sarah's hand, a crystal glass glimmered, a symbol of burden. It was proof that even the most fragile thing can reflect light if held in hands that care. The story of the Ledger is not finished. But for the first time in years, it is being rewritten in the ink of dignity, in the script of hope. Sometimes evil doesn't hide in darkness. It sits in a lit boardroom, dressed in the perfect suit. And sometimes hope doesn't arrive in heroes. From afar it shines in a scar, in an ordinary woman who dared to stand tall. The Ledger lost its soul. But because the truth was spoken, because people dared to raise their voices, a new chapter has begun. And the question for you is, if you witnessed injustice yourself, would you stay silent or would you speak out? If this story touched you, share it so more can hear. Leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow so you won't miss the next story that reaches the heart.